I've been wanting to talk about Shin Megami Tensei II for a while now. It's not only a personal favorite, but the game that I find shaped what modern Megaten would become. While Shin Megami Tensei 1 may have laid the foundation, Shin Megami Tensei 2 is where the series truly came into its own. This isn't just some sequel that tweaks the gameplay and presentation. In a lot of ways, it starts fresh, delivering a darker, more ambitious take on the series' core ideas, bringing new characters, better world building, and some of the best storytelling in the series. Yet somehow, it's one of the least played mainline entry games, and that blame falls solely on Atlus. Over 30 years since its release, and Shin Megami Tensei 2 has yet to get an official English translation. Why Atlus keeps pretending this game doesn't exist is, well, a question that hangs over their heads. But I think it's time we give Shin Megami Tensei 2 its flowers, and see just how good the game actually is. Shin Megami Tensei 2 has always been this quiet enigma in the SMT series. It's never been given the same spotlight as the other games, yet it's still considered to be one of the strongest entries. But what exactly makes it stand apart? Well, to understand that, we need to look at how it broke the mold set by its predecessor. Released just 2 years after Shin Megami Tensei 1, Shin Megami Tensei 2 didn't simply build on what came before. It aimed to redefine the series, diving deeper into darker themes and more complex ideas, pushing it into new territory. Though following the events of Shin Megami Tensei 1 chronologically, this isn't a traditional sequel. There's no returning characters and no tightly connected plot. Instead, it presents this world shaped by what came before, but boldly moving in its own direction. The gameplay, while staying familiar and reusing a lot of assets, is heavily refined and better balanced. But it's the attention to detail in the story that we start to see a larger shift away from SMT 1, digging deeper into moral ambiguity that steps beyond the classic law and chaos divide. And this shift let Atlus craft stronger characters and richer world building, giving SMT 2 a fresh, ambitious identity, something beyond being just a polished sequel. Yet its history from here gets complicated, with the game never officially leaving Japan, making it the only mainline SMT game without a proper Western release. Unless you want to count games like Shin Megami Tensei 9, which, I mean, who wouldn't? Most players either skipped this game entirely or only discovered it through fan translations years later or by watching Marsh's video. And for a long time, it's pretty much become this underground gem, a game you heard about but never got a chance to play. Still, for many who have played it, everything Shin Megami Tensei 2 does to set itself apart ultimately makes a strong case for it as one of the best entries in the series. The game takes place decades after the nuclear fallout of SMT 1, in a rebuilt city called Tokyo Millennium. Here, humanity has moved on, but the world itself is still broken. The land has been devastated by natural disasters, the air has become toxic, and demons now roam the ruins of Tokyo. At the top of this new society sits the Messiahs, the religious faction from SMT 1, based in a walled-off, technologically advanced district referred to as the Center. Outside of its walls, people live in divided districts and social classes where the quality of life varies drastically. Here, we see those in the center live in comfort, protected from threats and demons, while others remain trapped in the slums they were born into. And this division and difference in quality of life is on display pretty much from the opening moments. But there is a chance for a selected few to find themselves on the greener side of the grass, as every so often, a gladiator-like tournament is held where the winner is granted citizenship in the center. That's where the protagonist comes in, a gladiator in Valhalla suffering from amnesia, training for the next tournament. You train under your manager, Okamoto, a man who found you and sees you as his ticket to a better life. As the tournament approaches, you start experiencing strange flashbacks of unfamiliar people. During your training, you encounter Steven, who gives you access to the demon summoning program, helping you win the tournament and your place in the center. After claiming victory, you're summoned by the Queen and tasked with capturing a scientist to escape from the center. Though the mission fails, when you return, you discover that you've been a citizen of the center all along, and you're believed to be the Messiah destined to resurrect the 1,000-year kingdom. This is where Shin Megami Tensei 2 pivots, shifting toward a more defined narrative with stronger character development, a deeper alignment system, and far more expansive world building. Challenging and expanding the ideas that made the first game memorable, but taking a bold leap by looking at them through a different lens. Altogether, making Shin Megami Tensei 2 feel like one of the most memorable and complete entries in the entire series. One of the key changes is placing a law-based group in the Messiahs as the dominant power structure. Although you'll come across other factions and social classes, most of your early progression involves working alongside the center. While it is a bit cliche, the protagonist suffering from amnesia creates a barrier that still maintains a subtle connection to the center. This grounds the story and gives it a clear sense of place from the start, while leaving much of the interpretation of events open to the player. It's important to note that the law-focused perspective doesn't force a single way of thinking or strip away the moral ambiguity that defined the first game. If anything, Shin Megami Tensei 2 dives deeper into this complexity. And at the heart of its story isn't just a conflict between law and chaos, but between truth and illusion. Starting off as a pawn of the center, a supposed utopia guided by divine order, but the deeper you go, the more its control feels suffocating, thus encouraging you to explore the world gradually rather than making in-the-moment black and white decisions. You'll come across central themes like freedom, control, and obedience, but Shin Megami Tensei II also asks tougher questions that it doesn't immediately answer, creating a tension as you learn more about the world and try to figure out what your role is within it. Effectively setting up events, twists, and most importantly, making its characters and alignment system feel deeper than what was presented in Shin Megami Tensei I, with Shin Megami Tensei II's alignment system getting a pretty big overhaul that redefines the purpose of the long chaos reps. This makes the alignments feel more layered instead of simply feeling like you're choosing a side because you're told so. The effects on the gameplay and limitations based on your alignment are still a large part of this, but this time, characters act as guides rather than mouthpieces, giving your choices more weight. The dialogue also feels more informative and less monotoned, making everyone from the main support to random NPCs memorable. Interactions flow smooth, and the development with the main figures in the story is much more organic, and let's face it, less cringy too. We see characters like Hiriko and Zane stand out for how deep they are in their individuality. A strong female lead like Hiriko makes the game feel like it's ahead of its time, while Zane is arguably one of the strongest characters in the series. This isn't to say that this is a perfect cast of characters, a few of them do feel underdeveloped. Beth Sark starts off pretty promising, but is cut short without any real payoff, while Daleth ends up drifting into the background, making sporadic appearances, but never feeling like a significant figure to the story. Though, the final reveal surrounding these characters' identities stands out as one of my favorite moments in the entire game. What we do get is great, but I wish we got a chance to see more of them, since the game was capable of developing other characters so well. But with that said, we still haven't reached where I feel Shin Megami Tensei II hits the hardest, and that's its world building. Though basic in design, what each area reveals about the world and how they support the narrative is what makes this one of my favorite parts of the game. The details with the different classes and districts to the Abyss give it a stronger significance and scale that Shin Megami Tensei I never quite hit. For the record, Shin Megami Tensei I was never trying to create this kind of lore within its story, so this isn't a knock on the game, it's just for comparison. But we see distinct characteristics with the early areas to help us measure how the world is defined. Valhalla being a society ruled by strength, the center is a technologically advanced utopia, and places like Arcadia exploring illusion versus reality, bringing a huge contrast to the entire environment. Even the ruined districts of Tokyo like Shinjuku, Shibuya, and Ikebukuro tell stories of civilization's fall. These all help with building this bleak, unforgiving atmosphere, making everything that encompasses its world and the story easy to get invested into, flaws and all. Which for all of what the game has done right so far, it isn't flawless. The same ambition that makes its story and world so unique also creates a few rough edges, most notably in its pacing. Around the halfway mark, things shift from a narrative-focused experience to one more exploration-heavy, feeling similar to Shin Megami Tensei I. There ends up being long stretches of backtracking and no fast travel between areas, which for some players can feel like a step backward. Luckily, most players can only play this game through emulation, so you can speed things up if it drags. I guess Atlus not doing anything with this game does have a benefit after all. There are a few other issues, with the lack of clarity being another noticeable one, though I'm not entirely sure if this is a translation issue or how the game is meant to be played. This wasn't always related to the story, but with the game's presentation, so I'm guessing it's just a characteristic of Shin Megami Tensei II. Either way, you'll likely need a guide to get through a few parts, which the guide I used was, well, it wasn't the best. Despite these issues, the narrative still remains intact throughout the entirety of the experience, supported by its strong world building and complex characters. But what really keeps the player hooked is how its gameplay complements the story, offering a challenging, strategic experience that also pushes the series forward in its own ways. Seeing a number of improvements, though much more subtle compared to the narrative. To put it simply, this is still Shin Megami Tensei I gameplay, just better. Nearly every system looks the same, but is much more accessible and responsive. The combat sticks to its turn-based roots, but battles now flow much smoother. Menus are easier to navigate, and everything is just less exhausting than before. Your party will be made up of 6 members, with your protagonist, a couple of demons, and occasionally other characters from the story. It's the same setup as before, but thanks to cleaner UI and a more balanced demon roster, it feels tighter and way easier to manage. While not as grindy as SMT I, high encounter rates and the occasional difficulty spike are still issues that will catch you off guard. Though, I found the game to give some breathing room to keep these from becoming too overwhelming. Most areas have a few lower level demons, so you're not always taking heavy damage. This also makes it easy to level up without backtracking to previous areas. Healing, fusion, and the terminals are also more conveniently placed throughout. The biggest improvement though is the significant decrease in multi-wave battles. Unlike Shin Megami Tensei I where nearly every encounter dragged on, most battles are only one round. This not only improves the pacing, but makes combat actually fun this time. The difficulty balance also feels more consistent. Most enemies feel challenging without being overpowered. That said, this game is a bit buggy. Most of the time this works in your favor, like having higher than the maximum hit points, but other times it can work against you. And while the systems do get an upgrade in presentation, there's still a bit of an imbalance in the skill set and equipment. Certain skills and status effect bullets are far more reliable, making them an easy crutch, even in the boss fights. This doesn't break the game, but it does tilt some battles in your favor. Speaking of the boss fights, these are a mixed bag. The major story bosses generally deliver, but mid-game bosses feel a bit underwhelming, with some easily being defeated through auto battle and coming in with the same strategy. Though there are other parts of the game that make up for this. While the soundtrack may not hit quite as hard as the first game, it still delivers plenty of bangers that set the tone and complement the entire game. The artwork and animation also get a slight bump in quality. A few of the areas and designs are pretty minimal, but they constantly strengthen the atmosphere and reinforce SMT II's world building like we mentioned earlier. Recruiting and fusion feel smoother this time around as well, with demons a bit more willing to negotiate early on, letting you build a team before alignment restrictions start narrowing your choices. Things still do feel chaotic at times, especially since the game is still a bit buggy. Moments with the text not appearing on the screen correctly and some awkward phrasing really add to the randomness. But recruiting still felt like a step in the right direction since it was far easier to actually negotiate with demons. While fusion benefits from cleaner menus and slightly more flexibility in the results, and alignment locks are easier to manage in the early game. Unfortunately, the mag system is still here to complicate things. Just like in SMT1, this remains my biggest gripe with the game, as it complicates things more than it should. Since mag drains whenever demons are active, you'll either need to grind for a stockpile or limit your party, making it feel more like a burden as mag does become difficult to collect at certain points. It's not as punishing thanks to the overworld movement not draining your reserves, and it's unlikely you'll always need a full party out anyways, but it's still something you'll be thinking about constantly. Though without a doubt, the biggest improvements made to SMT II's gameplay has to be its dungeons, exploration, and general navigation. This is where the game really pulls ahead of its predecessor. Dungeons are more distinct, better laid out, and actually memorable. You're not wandering around endless identical halls wondering if you've been here before. I mean, here, I can actually find my way around without constantly getting lost or struggling to find an exit. Also, one of the better quality of life upgrades is mapping being tied to the left bumper, saving a ton of menu navigation. However, the game still never tells you this, so I spent my first 5 hours still opening and closing the menu like in SMT1. There are some quirks that do come with this, with some areas being purposely hidden, making it tricky for those not familiar with older Megaten gameplay. Talking to the NPC should be enough to give you an idea of where to go, but this still feels a bit abrupt to me. Additionally, the weird obsession for making players memorize or write down codes in order to enter a new area is, well, not my favorite addition. Honestly, this doesn't elevate the gameplay in any way, and can easily be substituted by unlocking new areas after talking to a specific NPC or defeating a boss, which the game already does, so I really don't understand why they did this in the first place. To end on a positive note, one of the cooler optional features is the virtual dungeons that can be used to grind for XP without risk. Visually, they're not the most interesting, coming across as recycled designs from SMT1, but I find them to be a neat side activity and feel like a precursor to some ideas explored later with soul hackers. Personally, I didn't see a huge reason to go out of my way to do these, but I can still see how they can add some extra flexibility for players. All in all, unlike the narrative, characters, and alignments, SMT II doesn't really try and reinvent the wheel when it comes to its gameplay, but it does a great job smoothing out some of the rough edges from the first game. The improvements to navigation, dungeon design, and party building make the whole experience way easier to stick with. It's still classic SMT at its core, just way more polished and flexible this time around. Of course, we can't wrap up this video without addressing the elephant in the room. Shin Megami Tensei II still doesn't have an official English translation. Like we've already mentioned, the only way for most people to play this game is through fan translation and emulation. And judging by Atlus's track record, it doesn't look like that's changing anytime soon. Which is both frustrating and disappointing, especially when you look at how important this game is for the series. Shin Megami Tensei II was the game that expanded on the foundation set by Shin Megami Tensei 1, creating so many ideas Atlus will keep building on for modern titles, and yet it's treated like a forgotten chapter. To me, out of all the games still without a proper English translation, this one sits right at the top. But at the same time, that's what makes finally playing this game and making a video on it feel even more special. It's a flawed game, I'll give you that, but it also has ambition, depth, and atmosphere that stand out even today. Which brings me to the main question: where does Shin Megami Tensei II rank amongst all the Megaten games? Honestly, this is one of the strongest entries in the entire series. Its story, characters, and world building are incredible and can even be considered some of the best. The refinements made to the gameplay also make it far more approachable than Shin Megami Tensei 1. Because of that, Shin Megami Tensei 2 gets a strong recommendation from me. I think just about anyone with an interest in Megami Tensei will find it to be a rewarding experience. Even with some pacing issues and data mechanics, it's still a lot of fun. As for its ranking, I'm placing it in the S tier right alongside Shin Megami Tensei 4. I can't justify putting it in the SS tier just yet, simply because the lack of an official translation holds back the recognition it deserves. But even through a fan translation, it's still an incredibly powerful game. With that said, I think we did right by this classic and truly gave Shin Megami Tensei 2 its flowers. Let me know what you think about the game in the comments down below. I've got plenty more Megaten videos on the channel, so check out the ones on the screen, and I'll forever be at your service.